This episode of Fearless Rebel Radio is brought to you by You on Fire. You on Fire is the amazing 12-week online group coaching program that I run, where we build up your worth from the ground up so that it's no longer hinging on the way that you look. It's got personalized coaching from me and incredible community support, plus lifetime access. Get details on what's included in this program and sign up to be notified when doors open for the next cycle by going to summerinanen.com/you on fire. I would love to have you in that program and in that group. This is Fearless Rebel Radio, a podcast about body positivity, self-worth, anti-dieting, and feminism. I am your host, Summer Inanen, a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence, and the best-selling author of Body Image Remix. If you're ready to break free of societal standards and stop living behind the number on your scale, then you have come to the right place. Welcome to the show. This is episode 169, and I am interviewing Chrissy King, writer, speaker, and strength coach, about the intersection of racism and fitness culture and body image, the importance of anti-racism work, and how to heal your relationship with fitness, and more. We cover a lot in this episode. You can find all the links and resources mentioned in this episode at summerinanen.com/169. First, I want to give a shout out to Coolness3567, who left this awesome review. Really needed to hear this. Thank you so much. I have learned so much already, and you are helping me start my journey to get rid of being in a restrictive mindset and loving my body no matter my weight. I have been feeling really hopeless lately, but your podcasts make me feel like there is hope. Thank you so much for that. And yes, there is hope. There is hope, and it is so much better on the other side. And Chrissy and I talk about that in this episode quite a bit. Before we get to that, if you haven't already done so, you can leave a review for this show. It helps others to find the show. It helps me to keep producing this show. And you can do that by going to iTunes, click to leave a review, and leave a review. It's better than a rating. A rating is okay too, but a review is even better. And you can also support the show by subscribing to it. You can subscribe via whatever platform you use, whether that is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Stitcher, or YouTube. Any of those places or other ones that I'm sure exist that I don't know about. And lastly, if you haven't already done so, definitely grab the free 10-day body confidence makeover at summerinanen.com/freebies with 10 steps to take right now to feel better in your body. This episode is really timely. I am speaking to Chrissy King just days, like 1 or 2 days after the murder of George Floyd by a police officer. And we need to be having more of these discussions. And as someone who really preaches body positivity or body liberation or just self-acceptance, anti-racism work has to be a fundamental part of that. And Black Lives Matter has to be a huge part of that. We cannot overlook these conversations, and we can't overlook how, as a white person, if you're a white person, we are complicit in racism and upholding white supremacy in our culture. And if you are unsure about how this relates to any of the stuff I talk about in terms of diet culture or self-worth, then definitely, keep listening to this episode. Read some of the books by people of color, such as Sonia Renee Taylor, such as the book Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. All of those are excellent resources. And, it's growth that I've had to do myself because I just had my blinders on for so long. And it wasn't until the past, recent few years that I was able to slowly start to see my blind spots and take those blinders off and try to do better. And we all need to do better as a culture to change this for the next generation. And so I'm really honored that Chrissy took the time to do this interview with me, and also to speak about racism and how we can do better by doing anti-racism work and how we can approach that. So definitely listen to this one. It's really important. And we also cover just a lot of stuff about how to heal your relationship with fitness in her story as well. So Chrissy King is a writer, speaker, strength coach, and self-proclaimed truth teller with a passion for intersectional feminism and creating a diverse and inclusive wellness industry. She has been featured in Self, Shape, BuzzFeed, Muscle and Fitness, and Live Strong, among others. She empowers individuals to stop shrinking, start taking up space, and use their energy to create their specific magic in the world. When she's not serving her clients by empowering them to create stress-free and sustainable lifestyles and feel confident and empowered in their skin, she spends her time lifting all the weights, reading, traveling, and hanging out with friends and family. Chrissy's one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram because I just feel like she has this brilliant way of speaking about self-acceptance and spreading the anti-diet culture message. And every time she writes something, I'm like, she just said that so well. I wish I was that good of a writer. Anyway, so I'm really pumped to interview her here. Let's get started. Hi, Chrissy. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
I've been following your work for quite a while. I think you first came on my radar when you wrote a blog post about how just the fitness industry was very whitewashed, or how people could be more inclusive, something along those lines. You might remember more than me. It was a few years ago. And then I've been following you ever since and just really admire your work and really admire how you talk about body liberation and everything around that.
Thank you. Yeah, I did write it. I've written actually quite a few articles on that topic, but I think one of the first ones I wrote, which was a few years ago, was a blog titled "Is Fitness Only for Thin White Women?" And that was the first time I really started talking about issues of like the lack of diversity and inclusion in fitness spaces.
Yeah.
And that's probably the article you're referring to.
Yes, I think so. I'll link to that in the show notes just because I think that it's really important. We're going to talk about some of that stuff today. But before we get into any of that stuff, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about you and how you got into this line of work?
Absolutely. So I got into this line of work that wasn't my intention. So I grew up very into like books and writing and reading, not ever very athletic. I didn't work out. And so I really got into fitness as an adult. And the only reason I ever joined a gym is because my younger sister had joined a gym and she wanted to lose weight. And I was like, what, you don't work out? And she's like, I'm working out. You don't have to work out. And so I was like, well, I'm going to join the gym too. So I joined with her, had no interest actually in strength training. I had no interest in actually working out because I wanted to be healthy or feel good. I literally wanted to just be skinny. That was my only goal for joining the gym. But I ended up hiring a personal trainer, the same trainer as my little sister. And I remember our first session, I told her, I'm like, my goal is to be skinny, like make me skinny. That's all I care about. And she's like, okay, cool. Let's go over to this weight section. And I was like, what? I don't want to lift weights. I'm like, let's go to the treadmill and she's like, well, I'm the trainer and like, just trust me. And she also, she was a very thin person. So I was like, well, I guess I did hire her, so I should trust her judgment. So anyways, we started training. And I remember that first session, it was 30 minutes, but it felt like the longest, like 30 minutes of my life, just because I wasn't doing anything super strenuous. It's just that I hadn't used my body in that way in a long time. And it was mostly a lot of body weight stuff and some dumbbell stuff. But I just remember how sore and miserable it was after that session, and I hated it. And I was like, I should have never got a trainer. I should just went on the treadmill. But I paid for like a group of sessions. So I kept training with her. And what actually ended up happening is I actually, over the course of a couple months, I started to actually like strength training little by little. And not so much because it got so much more fun yet, but because I started to see my body do things I couldn't do. Like walking lunges, for example, were really, really hard the first session. And I started to see that my body was adapting and they were getting easier. And I was like, just so many things were getting better that I never thought my body could do. And so I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Like, I see my body getting stronger and I actually kind of like this. And then eventually, because of her, she moved to a different gym, which is a strength and conditioning gym her boyfriend owned. And I walked into that gym and I saw people, women, powerlifting and doing barbell movements, squatting, deadlifting, benching. I had never seen women doing that in my life. And I also didn't think that was something I could do. But eventually she stopped training there. I stayed there and he taught me all about powerlifting. And it was one of those things that as soon as I touched the barbell, I was like, whoa, this is magic. Like I loved it so much. And my narrative growing up had always been that I'm just like a weak person. And so I didn't ever see my body being capable of doing those things. But I actually ended up being really, really strong. I mean, with time and practice, I got really, really strong. And for me, that was like, wow, strength is a skill just like any other skill that can be learned. And so then I ended up going on to compete in powerlifting and deadlifted and squatted weight that like, you know, I never, ever, ever thought that I'd be able to do. And the transformative power of powerlifting for me really helped me see that, you know, I can do hard things in the gym. And that means I can also do hard things in life. And so that really transferred over into so many different areas of my life. And eventually then I started training in the gym space after work. I had a corporate job and I just trained on nights and weekends and then kind of went from there. And, you know, it's really interesting because I think back to weightlifting, powerlifting, strength training, and how 5, 6 years later now, it's completely transformed the course of my life and what I'm doing as a career. But also I found so much strength and that I found in the gym. Strength has really transferred into so many areas of my life that's allowing me to find my power and to take up space in so many different arenas now.
I feel similar in that way. And I know it's not for everyone, but I do think it's one of those things that, like, as you said, because you went in there with this notion of like, I want to be skinny, like I want to be smaller, like I want to be, you know, the opposite of sort of what it gave you. It sounds like it helped you to like, you know, really take up more space and be stronger and be more, feel like you could do more and feel more empowered and whatnot. And I mean, that's personally like what I've always connected to and loved about it as well. So that's really great. And so did you get skinny from, you don't have to answer that, but like, how did that help you kind of heal your relationship with your body? Or like, were you still kind of fixated on like trying to be smaller while doing powerlifting?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I definitely, this is again, I'm telling this story very briefly. This happened over a course of years, obviously, but I did transform my body. I even hate using those words around your body, but my body did change. I'm not going to use the word transform. We're going to scratch that. I did change my body and my body did shrink significantly. And it was weird though with powerlifting. I had this desire to get stronger, but at the same time, I still wanted my body to get smaller. And I know, I counted macros for a long time and was very obsessive about my food, even after, discovering what my body could do. And I think that helped a lot because I was like, well, my body is capable of all these cool things, but I still hadn't really fixed that relationship with wanting to shrink my body and be smaller and having a lot of my value tied to what I looked like, particularly as it pertained to being smaller. So that was still an ongoing struggle for me while powerlifting. And I think particularly when I was competing, because there's weight classes. And
yes.
I'm 7, I'm almost 6 feet tall. And so I'm naturally going to weigh more. I'm a larger person in general. And it was like always trying to weigh in at different weight classes and like, not wanting to go up to another weight class because in my mind, being that weight just seemed like too much. But also I was getting muscle and I was like the leanest I had been as an adult, but I was still like teetering on the line of that weight class. And so it was a lot of stress for me for a very long time. And I think what finally changed for me is because I got so like sick of my own shit, to be honest. I was miserable. And it was this weird thing where I was getting so much affirmation for how my body looked. I mean, like strangers, like people all the time, which were like, oh my God, you look so great. And like I said, I was the leanest I'd ever been as an adult, but I was like the most obsessive I'd ever been as an adult about my body as well. I think what was like the breaking point for me is I went on a family get together for a weekend trip with my in-laws at the time, was married at the time. And I was so obsessed about everything that I ate that I brought all my food for the weekend with me. I would not the sense of control I had what I was eating. And so I went to this restaurant and I told everybody I was going to stay in the car because I was going to eat my own food that had been sitting in the car all day because I didn't want to eat what was in the restaurant. I was going to join them after. And I just told my husband at the time that. And then I stayed in the car. And of course, his family's like, why is she staying in the car? We're going to eat. And so he explained it to them. And they were like really generous in that they asked the restaurant if I could bring my food in and the restaurant obliged. But then I was just like, I had this moment of like, this is really, really sad. Like I'm sitting here eating food that's been, in my Tupperware container all day at a restaurant. Everybody's enjoying food and they're having a great time. And I'm feeling like so miserable. And so that was when I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I need to fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I feel like it's one of those, it's such a familiar story. And especially as it relates to like people who do this work now, who, you know, like kind of went through like that disordered phase and realized like you kind of have the perfect body, quote unquote, but you're miserable and you hate it and your value is completely connected to it. So what helped you to like break free from that food obsession and to, you know, cultivate a sense of acceptance with the size that your body was meant to be at?
Absolutely. So that weekend was a major breaking point for me. And after that weekend, I just decided I wasn't tracking macros anymore, which was really scary for me, right? Because if you're so used to having that sense of control and then deciding to let go was really, really scary. But also on the flip side, when you've been tracking macros for years, you kind of like can calculate in your head what you're eating anyways.
Yes.
But it was still like the decision to like not count anymore. And, you know, slowly I was able to make adjustments like, okay, I'm going to drink creamer in my coffee that's not sugar free, which is like a small thing, right? But like, it's still like, oh, okay, I did that and I'm okay. And so just like slowly making adjustments and recognizing that like nothing bad has happened. I'm still just fine. And just little by little allowed me to like kind of get back to a normal place with food and then to start to deal with my own body image stuff and just really make some breakthroughs in that regard. And yes, you know, I did gain body fat and also I'm like, wow, this is okay. It's not a big deal. This is fine. And so, you know, even though my body changed and I wasn't as lean as I was, I eventually was like back to a place where I felt really good about living, right? Like I could, you know, have experiences with friends. I could go out to dinner. I could live a full life without being stressed about every single moment about what I was eating. And the interesting thing is that even though my body, you know, I did gain some body fat, I was obsessing less about what I looked like, right? I didn't care anymore. Every moment wasn't like spent thinking about what I was going to look like. And this past fall, I had this moment, and I wrote about this actually. I had this moment when I was just, I recognized like how far I had come in my relationship with my body and food. I was in Spain traveling with some people, and actually most of the people in this group of women I didn't know. I'd only known one of them prior to the trip. There were 7 of us. And the old me would have, one, been stressed out about, I'm meeting all these people that I don't know. Are they going to judge me for how I look? And also the old me would have been like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Spain for 8 days. I'm not going to have any control over what I eat. What's going to happen? But I was sitting I had this moment where I was like eating, you know, I was going to this beautiful cafe every morning. I was getting these chocolate croissants and just eating so many great things and having so much fun. And I was like, wow, this is what freedom and liberation looks like, because I can go somewhere, I can eat food, I can enjoy it. I'm not thinking about if I'm going to gain weight. I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm not getting enough protein while I'm here. I'm not even the least bit concerned about what someone thinks about what I look like. And I was like, oh, wow, this is what liberation looks like. And I can look back on this trip and I didn't rob any of the experiences because I wasn't robbed of any experiences because I was stressing about things that don't matter. I look back on that trip and I think about all the laughs we had and how many memories we created and the great meals we shared and the amazing wine we tasted. And those are the kind of memories that I want to recreate because life is short, right? And as far as I know, we get to do this one time and I want to live it to the fullest.
Yeah, so important, right? And it's like that's what living is all about, is to be present and enjoy experiences. And it's such a small life when you're fixated on your body and micromanaging food.
It's such a small life. It really, really is. And for me, like I recognize now, not only is it a small life, but like all of your energy goes to thinking about, at least for me, all of my energy went to when am I going to work out? What am I eating? And what is my body looking like? I didn't have any energy left over to create like magical things in the world because I couldn't think of anything else.
Yeah. You talked about like healing your relationship with your body. And I'm curious to know if you could speak to like the influence of racism on your body image. And like, I would imagine, especially being in powerlifting, because I feel like that's really white, at least where I live. And just how you see that impacting, you know, like the body image of women in color in general. And I know you can't speak for everyone, obviously.
Yeah, I'll speak to my personal experience. So I think powerlifting now is a lot more diverse than they used to be. There's like really great pages now, like Sisters of Powerlifting, one by here in New York named Shireen, which is highlighting like Black women and other women of color in powerlifting. But when I started powerlifting years ago, it was super white. And I would be like, I was for sure the only Black woman competing, right? And there might be like a couple other people of color in the meet, but I was definitely the only Black woman and usually the only woman of color competing. So it's definitely super, super white back then. I think it's a little bit more diverse now.
That's good.
Yeah, no, it is good. But I think overall, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of conversation about why is race a part of everything, or like why is that always a part of the conversation? And for me, it's because it is a part of everything, right? And so it pertains particularly to body image and health and wellness in general. Mainstream fitness is still very white presenting, and racism in the fitness space is a very real thing. And not only just that, how we perceive bodies, how we perceive what bodies are important, how we perceive what bodies are desirable, are highly impacted by race. And, there's a really great book called Fearing the Black Body.
Yes.
And so it talks about the implications of race. It talks about the implications of race on body image and how we see ourselves. And so for me, particularly, I think it's so important that I talk about the need for more diversity and inclusion in fitness, because racism affects people's health. And there's lots of also studies on how racism, just like being the victim of racism, leads to higher instances of heart disease and diabetes and high blood pressure. And so being a victim, or not even being a victim, but just being in a racist society has a negative impact on physical health as well as mental health. And so it's a huge part of the conversation about how, as a Black woman, how I see myself in this world, how I see myself in the fitness space. I don't think that we can separate the two. And so a lot of times when things happen in the world and people are like, in the wellness space and fitness space, I'm like, if you're helping people be healthy and fit and strong, you have to talk about racism. You have to talk about the things that are happening. If you care about people's health, then we have to be talking. We can't ignore social injustice because you're like, that doesn't pertain to fitness. It 100% pertains to fitness. And it 100% pertains to people's ability to feel safe in their bodies.
Yes. Yes. Otherwise, it's just done through a privileged vacuum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And I think that the fitness industry in general, we have issues with privilege, accessibility, all of those things. And so I think all of us in the fitness space need to be doing a better job at, for one, understanding our own biases and privilege, because I think if you don't understand your own biases, it's really hard to help other people who don't look like you. And we all have to be questioning our biases, whether it's about race, it's about fat phobia, whether it's about gender. All of those things are important. And I think it's so important for practitioners to be examining our own bias. And, examining your bias is uncomfortable sometimes because you find things that you don't necessarily like. That doesn't matter who you are. All of us have biases, myself included as a Black woman, right? But we have to start to face those things that are uncomfortable so that we can overcome them, so we can adjust, so we can show up better in these spaces.
Yeah. And so, do you feel like it's evolving at all?
I feel like there are times where I feel like it's evolving. And then there are times where I'm like, I don't know. So, and I say both because I think the conversation of diversity and inclusion is becoming more prevalent in fitness spaces. But unfortunately, I think sometimes conversation is just conversation and not actually doing the thing. And I know I can speak to myself. I've unfortunately been in a lot of situations. People have asked me to maybe come to their event and talk about certain things, and my answer is always sure. However, if something happens that's inappropriate, or if you're missing the mark in some way, I'm going to be honest with you. That's the only way I'm willing to be involved with this project. And sometimes people are really open to the feedback, and other times it doesn't go so well because, again, when someone is giving you feedback that doesn't feel good, people's natural instinct is to be defensive. And so that happens a lot. And so unfortunately, I've been in a lot of situations where I've been asked to do that. And then I've been met with a lot of
white tears.
Yeah, white tears. I've been met with a lot of white tears and not even owning up to not even understanding what I'm saying because their defensiveness has come up now. Now they're dealing with their own stuff, and instead of setting that aside and being I need to process that some other time, let me listen to this feedback. So I think that's been the challenge. And then, it gets a little frustrating for me sometimes. Today when we're recording this episode, there's a lot of things happening around police brutality in this country. And so, there's a lot of, in the last 2 weeks, 3 major things have happened that have involved police brutality, or 2 involving police brutality. One is just brutality by citizens. And so what I see happening in fitness is I see people feeling like they want to acknowledge what's happening. And so I appreciate that. But I think, it's hard because I also don't see, like sharing posts that's helpful. That's really great. I think it's a great place to start. But for me, what's more important than just sharing posts is I need to see white people taking a little bit more action than just sharing posts. Because when we think about systems of white supremacy and racism in this country, yes, people of color, we've been talking about it forever. We will talk about it forever. But when it comes down to actually how is this going to fix, I firmly believe that it's white people's problem to fix and take ownership of. And so I just like to see more action than what I see sometimes. And again, it's a very emotional time, right? Because so much of things is happening. And so I think everybody's trying to do their best. But I just, it can be frustrating sometimes. But I am at least happy to see that people in the fitness industry are starting to at least acknowledge that things are happening more, where in the past I felt like it was just complete silence. It's a step in the right direction. But I obviously think there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, there's still a lot of silence that I notice from particular people with large platforms that say they truly care about health and wellness.
Right. And one area that I am particularly frustrated with this week, and I may talk about this at some point, I don't really know, it depends on my own emotional bandwidth. I see a lot of people within the larger body positivity community with large followings who are not talking about this. And for me, when we're talking about body positivity, for one, that was founded for people on the margins, right, on the outskirts. And although it has been in a lot of ways co-opted by thinner-bodied white women, that was never the point of the movement. And so when we're talking about a space like that, if we're not talking about injustices of people in Black and brown bodies and just marginalized identities, then you are completely missing the mark of body positivity. And I find that infuriating.
Yeah. I wrote something that said, we need to, if you're not as... if you're more outraged about a diet that you don't like than you are about this, or you're more riled up about sharing cellulite than speaking about this, it's a problem. And I'm totally complicit in that. I'm not saying I'm perfect there at all from I'm always trying to learn, but we definitely need more voices speaking up.
Right. And I think what you just said about the cellulite, right? We feel not we, but people feel comfortable addressing cellulite, right, or diets, because no one others are going to be ruffled by that. But, when we start talking about larger systematic issues, then, there's a potential that people aren't going to agree with you. But again, if you're more upset about the cellulite, there's a problem here. And so I think we just have to re-examine the work we're doing and what is our actual purpose and who are we actually attempting to serve.
Yeah. And when you talk about the action, some things that I sort of think is actively doing anti-racist work. So for example, investing in courses by people of color on anti-racism work, donating to causes, actively doing it in your everyday life. So, speaking up when you see it and things like that. Are there other actions that you can think of that would be helpful?
I mean, I think the things you just listed are a really great starting point. I think people need to be taking someone's course to actively learn. Because again, I think we start talking about racism. People think of racism as they use the N-word. You think of racism as they're a member of the KKK, right? These very overt things. Yes, those things are overt and they're problems, but it's the smaller things that happen every day that are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. Because listen, someone tells me they're in the if I know someone's in the KKK, I actually, that's cool. Now I know where you stand and I know to stay away from you. But it's the people like the woman who just called the police on the man in Central Park because he asked her to keep her dog on a leash, right? When you actually start going, I read an article about this, and this is a woman who considered herself to be a liberal, right? This is a woman who donated to causes that support Black people. So in her mind, she's not racist, but clearly she's racist, right? And so I think it's so important to be investing in courses that are probably very uncomfortable, that are going to bring up some stuff for you that you don't like, so that you can start to see how racism is existing in your life in ways you don't understand, because it's not just those overt things, right? And so everyone should do that. And I really think it's important to take those courses from Black women or people of color, not from other white people. And I think it's important to recognize that it is going to be wildly uncomfortable for you, that you are going to be faced with things that you don't like to see, but it is 100% necessary. So that's great. I also, again, like you said, donating to like Black Lives Matter, giving your money to, and not even just donating to like causes like Black Lives Matter, but like just supporting Black and brown business in general, right? Like whether it be in the fitness space or whether it be like local restaurants, like investing in Black and brown communities, I think is really important. And what you just said, I think about, I think sometimes people think that in order to make a difference, they have to have some huge platform or they have to like make some grandiose statement on their social media. And I don't think that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is having the conversations with the people that are closest to you, which for the record is way harder than making a social media post.
Yes.
Your mom or your dad or your brother or your significant other about the racist things that they're saying or doing, whether they recognize it or not, is wildly and vastly more uncomfortable than like making a post on social media. Because also what happens on social media is you get praise and accolades from other white people saying, good job, I'm so happy you spoke out about this, right? Yes, you may have some backlash, but overall, people are like, yes, thank you for taking a stand. When you have to talk to your uncle or your cousin or your best friend, that conversation is way more complicated. However, it makes way more of a difference.
Yeah, and talking to your kids about it too. So like a friend of mine was sharing how she, I think her sons are like, I don't know, 8 and 10 or something, just how she sat down and talked to them about everything that's going on. And like that, we need to be doing that too as a parent. I mean, my son's only 20 months, so he understands garbage cans. That's like the level of his understanding. No, I'm kidding. But, like things like that need to be happening too. Like just because we think they're innocent, like doesn't mean that we can't be sharing that. Like we need to tell them the realities of the world and where that, we stand in our role in it.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I think a lot of times I've heard people say like, well, they're not really old enough for that. And I'm like, sure they are. Like kids can understand, for one, whatever we explain to them. And also I think that, of course, we need to wait till they're competent to understand what we're talking about. But the younger we start having these conversations with children, the better. And I don't think it's anything that they need to, America has this weird thing where we want to like run from our history, or we don't want to tell the true history, or like, we don't want to talk about slavery for what it actually was. And I actually do know why we want to do that, because like it's easier to deny the things that like how this country was actually founded than to talk about it. But it is really, really important to have honest conversations with all of our children about race and gender and all of these things at an early age. And the flip side of this is like, it's really interesting. People say like, I don't want to burden my children with that too young. And it's like, all right, cool. But like Black children, like that's a conversation you have to have when they're young, because, like the world is a real place. It's going to happen regardless. And so I don't think there's ever a time at which you can't start having those conversations about the inequality in this country, in this world, and raising children that will be change makers and be different children in this place when they become, adults and young adults.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really appreciate this conversation. And obviously it's like really timely right now. And yeah, just very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Is there anything else that you want to add on that before we switch gears? Because I would like to talk to you about the Body Liberation Project as well.
I mean, I could talk about this all day.
Yes, I know. It's a weird segue.
I do. I'm glad we had the space to have this conversation. But yeah, no, we can switch gears now.
Okay. So we'll talk to me about like, because you have like hashtag the Body Liberation Project. Talk to me about like where that came from. And then I'd love you to share just some practices that you have or that you share with clients to help them cultivate a sense of self-acceptance.
Yeah, I started talking about body liberation because for me, when I think about, body acceptance, I think about body positivity, I think about all these things. I think about the fact that, yes, I think accepting our bodies is important. I think that is a good first step, right? Like you're not going to go from hating everything in your body to loving everything in your body. However, I do think that acceptance of yourself is just a first step, right? And when I think of liberation, I think of total freedom, right? So for me, liberation is a step past even self-love. And I know, in this space sometimes we talk about, loving your body or loving yourself is maybe like pie in the sky, or that's too much to ask of ourselves. And I get that, right? Because at a certain point that was too much of myself to ask. I couldn't think of that. I couldn't fathom that yet. But I so wholeheartedly believe that all of us are so worthy and so deserving of not even just accepting ourselves, but actually falling in love with ourselves. And then, once we fall in love with ourselves, finding true liberation and freedom in our bodies and in ourselves. And I said this somewhere yesterday, I can't even remember. Maybe it was on Twitter. And I was just like, loving yourself wholeheartedly is the greatest love story of all. And I so want that for people. And I so want women, anyone, but I always talk about women and people identify as women because that's who I feel like I speak to. But anyone really, to get to a place of true love and appreciation and gratitude for themselves. And I think so often we look for validation from other people and relationships or all these other things. And I just want us all to come back to home, back to ourselves, a place where we find that joy and love within ourselves, and then we can share that with someone else, not that we're looking to someone else to give that to us.
Yeah. And so what practices have helped you, or which ones do you feel like are most important there?
I think there's a lot of things. Again, I think always unlearning is a big part of it, because none of us came out of our mother's wombs hating ourselves, right? Learn that thing. We learn those practices. We learn those things from the world. We learned our ideas about what our bodies are supposed to look like, our ideas about what our bodies are supposed to do. We learn those things from the world. And so I think a good practice for all of us is to start to question things with curiosity, not with contempt or judgment, but with compassion and curiosity. Meaning, like, if I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, I hate the way my arms look, just stop that thought and be like, okay, let's get compassionate and curious about this thought. What is wrong? What don't I like about my arms? What is the idea that something's wrong with them? And just to really start to question the things that we believe, because I think when we keep questioning ourselves, and then, maybe you say, they're too big, but why are they too big? And we just keep taking these steps. I think a lot of times we can start to uncover that a lot of the things that we hold to be true, they aren't our beliefs at all. Those are beliefs that have been passed on to us. And again, unlearning is also really uncomfortable in any facet of our lives. Because then when you start to unlearn things and you recognize that, like, maybe I don't believe this, it can be a little disconcerting, right? Because you're like, well, what do I believe? Who am I?
Yes.
I don't know anymore. But I do think that's an important part of the process. And then also, I think for me, I take a lot of my clients through a lot of journaling activities that can, for a variety of different things. But I think all of it is to start to really unpack. We have a lot of unpacking to do about bodies, it's not just about bodies. I think it's even deeper than that. I think we have to start to recognize our own fat phobia, internalized fat phobia, right? What do we think about fat bodies? What do we think about larger bodies? What are we actually, is it that we don't, when it comes to our relationship with food and exercise, right? Like, is that all based on us just running from fatness? And so again, so many of these things can be wildly uncomfortable, but we have to face the uncomfortable things to get to the other side. There's no other way. You have to go through the middle, right? And through the middle can be really muddy and can be really hard and can be really frustrating, but that's the only way.
Yeah, 100%. Did you feel like with yourself, because I feel like this is really common with people in particular who kind of were heavily into fitness in some way, shape or form, or dieting, that that was part of their identity. So kind of coming out the other side, you almost had to rediscover who you are. Was that part of your process?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely feel that way. And also, not only that, but also what I notice about myself, and I notice this about a lot of my clients, is that the thing with dieting and trying to maintain your body and shrinking your body is that it feels like something you can control, right? So for me, there were a lot of other things in my life that I didn't want to deal with because they just seemed too difficult to deal with. But I could easily control this part of my life. So for me, it was just almost like a mask of all the other issues that were going on underneath the surface. So once I kind of dealt with that stuff, I was like, oh, okay. So here's the real stuff that I have to deal with. Here are the real things that I need to fix. And those things were much more scarier than just trying to maintain my body. And so I think it becomes a focal point that's something easy to deal with when you don't want to really deal with it. Either you don't want to, or you don't feel prepared to, or you don't feel like you can deal with some of the larger things under the surface.
Yes, exactly. It's like peeling back all these layers of an onion, which I think is why It's sometimes safer for people to stay where they are. Like, it feels safer. It feels more comfortable to stay in the body discomfort than it does to kind of go to the scary unknown.
Absolutely. 100%.
But it's so worth it when you do.
So worth, right? And you're exactly right. It's the analogy of peeling an onion and the layers of an onion, right? And I mean, listen, I don't have enough time to go through every story today, but once I started peeling that layer, wow, I found a lot of stuff, right? It led me to leave my corporate job that I, was making 6 figures at. It led me to leave my marriage I had been in for 10 years. And all of those things are really, really scary. But ultimately, they were the right decisions for me. But I could have just never dealt with that stuff. And it would have felt more comfortable at the time. But in the long run, I would have been, miserable in a lot of ways.
And that's a good example of why like actions of self-love aren't always like rainbows and happiness. It's like making tough decisions like that to honor yourself and who you are. But it's like super uncomfortable to do.
Yes, I wrote a post about this at one point. It wasn't about self-love, but it was about self-care, and that we talk about self-care as in like bubble baths and, like massages and beautiful things. And like, yes, that's true. But also self-care is making difficult decisions that feel really painful. Self-care involves like crying into a pillow for hours, like it involves really difficult things too. It's not just like the pretty sunshine and rainbows and like pampering. Like true self-care and true self-love involves the nitty gritty. It involves making difficult decisions, and it is not always like pretty flowers and rainbows and sunshine.
Yes, totally. As we get close to kind of like wrapping up here, I'm just curious to know, like, because you are, still really involved in fitness, and you've sort of gone from like approaching it from more of, like a weight focused place to like a place where it's just something you do and because you really enjoy it. What's your advice for people who are trying to change their relationship with fitness and trying to make that shift, but like they don't know how to do that?
Yeah, that's hard. It's really difficult because when I was like really stuck in that place, I would not miss the workout session. I was in the gym 6 days a week. Like I'd miss out on life and friends and family before I missed out on the gym, right? It was like something I did every single day. I was very committed to it. And so I think, a first step, I think we should evaluate our relationship with working out and with fitness. Am I doing this because I feel great when I exercise? Am I doing this because I love moving my body? Am I doing this because it makes I like being strong? Or am I doing this because I feel guilty if I don't? Am I doing this because I feel like I need to do this in order to eat something that I want to eat? Am I doing this because I feel like I have to do it? And really start to listen to also what our body likes and what our body enjoys. And that can mean like, there's days where you wake up and your body is tired and does not want to work out. Like, can I start to honor that? Can I honor my body and listen, like maybe my body needs rest today, not another intense workout. And so, I think a lot of us have lost our ability to trust ourselves with food and exercise, right? Because we've been so programmed. We've worked with coaches who told us what to do, told us what to eat, and we don't even know how to trust our own bodies, but our bodies are so intuitive. And I just think as a first step, start to listen to yourself, listen to your body, listen to what your body is actually craving, and be like, it's okay if I don't go to the gym today. Like nothing's going to happen. That's an okay thing to do. And if you can't do that yet, like that feels too difficult, then just like maybe take it back one notch. Like if you're working out 5 days a week, like let's try working out 4 days a week and see how that goes. And it can just be small things, or instead of working out for, an hour and a half, can I just work out for 45 minutes and see how that feels? And so I think for everybody that's going to be really different, because some people are really comfortable. I mean, I stopped tracking macros cold turkey. Some people that would freak them out, right? So I think you have to listen to what feels comfortable for yourself. But if it's even a small incremental change, then start with a small incremental change and work from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for that. So we covered so much here, and I feel like we could go on. I love the way that you speak to these things. And like every time you write a post, I'm like, you just have such a great way of articulating these things. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Where can people find more of you?
Absolutely. Well, thank you first off for the kind words. I really appreciate that. And also people can find me on Instagram at I am Chrissy King. I'm on there the most. But I'm also on Twitter, the same thing. I am Chrissy King. And my website is chrissyking.com.
Great. So. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you. I loved it as well. And thank you so much for letting me talk about so many things openly and freely.
Yeah. Thank you, Chrissy. Rock on.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did and learned a lot. And if, there were parts of it that made you uncomfortable, like just sit in that discomfort and explore it and let that be fuel for change, because we want to be on the right side of history here. It's so important to do that. So you can check out the links and resources mentioned at summerinanen.com/169. And I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this all the way through. Talk to you next time. Rock on.
I'm Summer Inanen, and I want to thank you for listening today. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Summer Inanen. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this show. I would be so grateful. Until next time, rock on.